I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. I am Ben Dietrich. Jordan Rodelli is on vacation, and Andrew Kuo does not take days off. Playoff Kuo, how are you doing, buddy?
Back to school playoff quote, man. It's September. There's a chill in the air. I'm wearing my Dort jersey. Nature is healing, man.
Summer is over and fall has arrived. Do you detect the atmospheric alterations, the seasonal shift to now it's back to school, back to work, and your playtime is over?
Sure. I mean, yeah, the emails have picked up. You can kind of hear the trees like kind of rustling in that Halloween way. It's all in my head. But it's kind of like New York City. New York City got a little colder, ironically, right as this turn happened. So I'm ready. I like the fall so much. I even like daylight savings, man. I'll throw that out there as the hottest take of the show.
No, today's slight drop in temperature. I wore a sweatshirt, and honestly, it felt great.
It suits you, man.
It was a Cookies Hoops sweatshirt.
Oh, whew, only the best.
Yeah, it was like being surrounded by pillows. I almost just floating on a cloud. Just the best possible product you could purchase, and so affordable.
Let me ask you a question. How many pillows do you have that are ethical? Just the ones that you wear from us.
Well, I don't sleep in pillows. I sleep ensconced in Cookies Hoops crew necks.
It'd be cool to sleep in pillows. Like that sounds like one of those ideas that is amazing but hard to pull off.
Yeah, it falls into the same category as like harems. It's just stuff that, Middle Eastern, leaders, strongmen, perhaps pharaohs can get away with.
I was pointing you towards like a bat belt, but you went harem. So we're back. So it's September, baby. I was thinking like a tool belt a toolbox you can wear. Like that sounds like a great idea.
No, I was thinking more about being fed grapes.
Oh, grapes! Yeah, Fantastic. I'm with you there.
Being buried with my pets. The good stuff, entombed with encrusted jewels beneath a pyramid structure.
Have you ever eaten grapes off the vine like a pharaoh? As a joke, like have you ever like brought home grapes, washed them, and be like, I'm gonna give this a shot?
Yeah, but if you're really embracing pharaoh culture, someone else has to feed them to you, right? So do they actually take each individual grape off and feed them to you? Or is it like a dangling of the vine, in which case you're a bit like a baby bird?
Yeah, you don't need to. I guess people do hang mistletoe with their hands over people's heads, but you don't need someone to hold a grapevine over your head. That said, I guess my point was going to be they're not easy to eat that way.
I also think just, for sanitary purposes, you'd sort of rather have someone holding, a bunch of grapes that have the individual grapes still attached and have them like plucking them off and then handing them to you and then like inserting them in your mouth. So yeah, I think the grapes being fed to you have to actually still be attached.
Mm-hmm. This is so weird. This is taking a weird turn, but it makes me realize
has it?
Like animals with beaks are really interesting, right? Because we use our hands to eat these grapes, but if we had a beak, it would be no problem eating these grapes off the vine, right? But they don't have opposable thumbs. They have wings so they can soar with their takes.
Someone has never ruled ancient Egypt, and it shows.
But birds?
You.
I was like, birdmen? But there are hieroglyphics of people with like winged kind of situations. It might be a costume.
I'm going to quickly shift topics before this gets too weird and say that, and I've said this before, anyone whose nickname is Birdman is cool.
Oh yeah, put a bird on that name. Um, our birds controversial. They're great. The only pushback against birds are people who just hate good times.
Birds are cool. They're. I mean, as hollow-boned avians, great. As logos for every business, not so great.
Wait, why?
We had the whole put a bird on it from what was it, Portlandia, which was based on obviously a real trend where every single place just used a bird as a logo.
It was a Williamsburg dig, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Every dude was putting a feather in his cap, but I like birds. They work. Atlanta Hawks, strong identity. The Pelicans, pretty strong. I rest my case.
When I went hiking, there were several birds of prey circling my friend's small dog.
That's not good.
And at first, I kind of joked about it. It's like, oh look, they're thinking of eating your dog. And then we realized that 7 of them were circling us as we walked because they actually had intentions on carrying away this small animal.
I think
so. Birds, scary when you actually think about them swooping down from the heavens with talons and claws and beaks and all those sharp objects that birds are so fond of, and trying to carry a small critter off to their nest.
I think Big Boy from Outcasts, I think wife's dog was eaten by a bird of prey. He joked about it on the radio. It was like, yeah, that dog's gone, man. Big birds. But
these are big red hawks. Their wingspan is, Anthony Davis.
Yeah. I went to Central Park this weekend to walk around, and there's some giant ass birds there, man. It's wild. There's some off-beaten paths that are amazing. You feel like you're in Oregon or something. And I saw a crane it looked like Anthony Davis for real, man. It was amazing. It was chilling, and then it noticed us and took off, and I was like, that thing is like the Atlanta Hawks logo, just soaring over us.
Cranes are very cool. Egrets, storks, also excellent birds. I really recommend, experiencing egrets and storks and cranes. Fantastic.
Great. I mean, shout out. Is there any NBA player nicknamed after an egret or a stork? Not that I can think of, right? Was there a big stork? There's the bald eagle, which is great, but there's no stork dropping baby dunks, baby jams.
I don't know, but we're gonna name somebody Baby Stork, and it's gonna stick.
All right, who would? We'll figure this out. We'll pick. It's not gonna be Lou Dort the stork. It's gonna be someone else.
I mean, Lou Dort doesn't even need a nickname. I mean, but stork is not appropriate. Wow. For him. He's not a stork.
No. Oh, right. He's more of a wagon. Come on, right? He's amazing. All they did was talk about his low center of gravity, and Kyle Lowry was like, get me back in the bub.
Stop beating around the bush. It's not a low center of gravity. We know what you're referring to. It's called a wagon.
It's a trunk with junk in it. We know this. Just come out and say it. It would be quicker.
Well, we're going to get to all these exciting playoff discussions of wagons and such in a little bit. For right now, I want to talk about your wealth bubble. Are you hiding out in a COVID depression? I guess those are the reasons we're hiding in them. And do you have your wealth bubble sorted out yet?
Well, you're referring to this internet article that came out about the hypothetical idea of the science fiction bubble where people with means can exit something disastrous like an apocalyptic event. And there has been a little writing about this, about COVID, and we have kind of touched on this a lot before, but people who say, it's safer in Italy, or a part of Italy, or I want to go to a remote island for rich people because there is no COVID there. And no, I have no trips planned. I walked up to Central Park, and that was my bubble. It was beautiful, but it was no more or less safe than just being on Prince Street.
Months ago, when we first started understanding anything about COVID, and it first appeared here in New York City and on the shores of America, I remember speculating that COVID would become stigmatized, and it would be something that would fall exactly under these parameters, that it was like a poor person's disease. And it actually kind of shook out like that in terms of who was disproportionately affected and who died. But it didn't really get stigmatized in that way, as far as I can, but despite that, we have exactly what you're describing. These like wealth bubbles, this idea of, well, if I can get away and be around only wealthy people and away from the proles who are walking around in the streets and delivering food, if I can be in my own version of the burger bubble, us rich people will be straight. I'm like, I don't know. Is that any different from like the West Village being vacant?
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Didn't that happen? Like, you look at the number of deaths in the West Village, it's like, I could be wrong. I feel like it's like a couple. It's like 10, 20. Yeah. People left. No one got sick.
I mean, shout out to the god Max Abelson, who wrote an awesome piece about this as COVID was dropping. Like, he interviewed a very rich person, I believe a billionaire, about what they would do if a disaster struck. And it was shocking. They had, it was what you think. It's like, well, yeah, I have like a plane to go to a remote place where I have a mansion set up, and my kids and wife can come with me if they want to, but it's set up for me primarily. And it went viral. It was cool. I may be stating facts a little bit with more color, but I think if you had unlimited means and you had, let's say, or maybe you had what a lot of people have, which me and you don't, which is like a place in Long Island. It's like, oh, I have a summer place I share with another family, and a pandemic was happening. We didn't know. Yeah, you go out there, right? It seems safer. It ends up being not safer, as we found out later. But
I've never blamed people who decided to leave, and there was that moment where New York was viewed as spreading the virus around the country. And in fact, it did come out of here, but a lot of it was tourist, a lot of it was flights coming in and out, etc. There was some from people who just left, but whatever. My point is that I've never said, well, if you left, don't come back. That's never been my sort of stance. It feels like the people who are most hard body about that idea that you betrayed New York by leaving, coincidentally, are ones who don't have places upstate.
Yeah.
Like, weird that you are a hardliner on going up to your house in Beacon when you don't have one.
How dare people go outside and risk spreading this disease? It's like, why? What do you like to do? It's like, oh, I like to stay home. It's like subjective bias, and also a combination of that and when people accuse other people of things, which we all do. I do that. I'm like, you're flaky. You can't focus on anything. You're a bad friend. And I'm like, oh, I'm all those three things,
Terrible friend. But yeah, I've never really been furious at the people who left New York or are currently leaving New York. Like, if you want to leave, that's cool. You're not obligated, especially now. You're not obligated to stay in New York. New York had too many people. New York had tons of people. New York in 2019 was absolutely jammed to the gills. You couldn't even ride the subways because there were so many people. So, hey, man, if you want to go and get on a farm and do your thing, very cool.
I kind of miss tourists. I miss being... It was awesome, right? It was awesome to present...
No.
Wait, hear me out.
Okay, I'll hear you out.
Not only do we know it floats local business, right? Like, we need these things, but I like the action, man. I like talking to people who weren't into just New York stuff. Like, walking around and maybe at a restaurant bumping into somebody who was like not from here is awesome. Talking to people who are only from here, being like New York strong, I'm like, that's cool too. I mean, I'm certainly like that, but I like people who aren't like me, and I'm not mad at tourists. Like, I think not having them in New York City, you can sense how this turns into a regular city really fast.
Yeah, I disagree, and it's not because I want to take a cliche tourists suck approach, but I mean they do. They're awful.
But you're a tourist in other places, willfully.
Of course.
But do you suck when you go to Portugal and buy leather gloves?
Well, kind of, right? Because I'm in there staying in an Airbnb. I'm there with a bunch of other people who aren't from Portugal walking around. Like, yeah. So I think we can all acknowledge that
but they welcome
tourists
you.
kind of suck.
But they're happy to have you. How many locals buy leather gloves? Zero, I bet.
I mean, I think the economic point is accurate. Restaurants and bars and huge industries in places that have a lot of tourists coming in, whether that's Paris or New York or Portugal over the last 5 years, 10 years, absolutely benefit from it. And tourists is great income. They're people who just come, spend, and bounce. They don't partake in any of the public services that residents use. They just dump off money and skate. They're economically vital. But from a non-economic standpoint, I think not having tourists around has just been incredible. And this is also coming from someone who spent, a decade living in Williamsburg. So I am absolutely traumatized by the rise in tourism over the last decade or so. Because, I mean, to me, you can go back to Jane Jacobs. Tourists destroy neighborhoods faster than anything. They are an absolute scourge of locusts. They come, consume, vomit on the street, argue, yell, raise the price of rent, contribute nothing culturally. I mean, they are like a harbinger of doom if you are a neighborhood with character.
Well, Williamsburg is the epicenter of that op-ed for sure, and I can't imagine living 10 years there. But like where I was going with the tourist thing is sometimes I hear recently people accusing people who left as like having a tourist mentality. And, even if you had a job here and you lived here for a few years, but this, seismic event went down and people could frame it as, oh, you didn't want to fix it. You just left and are waiting for someone else to fix it so you can come right back in. And I'm like, that's fine too. People have their needs and their means to those needs. And it's hard to kind of label them all in one way, right?
I don't really get the criticism of people who came and then left as parasites, because even if they stayed, they weren't really contributing anything anyway.
I mean, they were in a small way. I think as we're finding out, like just eating food and paying rent here kind of keeps things afloat, like as small as your favorite bar or restaurant. Like,
yeah, I agree. I'm on your side on this one.
Oh,
unlike your bananas tourist take, I'm here with you on this one.
Take.
No, but this one, we're talking about people who moved here for a few years and then left. And I don't view them as parasitical. How
long do you have to live here to not be a tourist? Maybe that's.
I mean, I think if you sign a lease or you're here for a few months, you're not a tourist. You live here.
So it's the contract. Because let's say somebody was.
Well, if you're a tourist somewhere or you live there. What are we doing?
Yeah, but sometimes. So my point is, could it be like moving goalposts constantly? Because if we are comfortable, and I'm not saying we are, but if someone on the internet is comfortable calling someone who lived here for a few years and had a job and a lease leaving a tourist, then like somebody who comes in and drops X amount of money, visits our cultural sites for a month, like, I don't know, that's more efficient, right?
I just am not here to say that someone who moved here considered having a real life, had a job, was a New Yorker for that period of time, and not just coming in, staying in an Airbnb with the idea of going back to wherever they were from in a week and a half. I don't think those people are tourists. I understand why rhetorically they are being labeled as such. Oh, you weren't here for the long haul. You're a tourist. I get it. But this also, to me, is part of what New York has always been like. People come here to see if they can make it, if they can live here, if they like it. People enter and age out of New York forever. This is just how New York has always been. So I don't find, an economic collapse and COVID creates new restrictions on people's interactions with the city in terms of how long they're supposed to stay or how we brand them this. There are obviously people who would come after college to have wild years in New York City and then go back to wherever they wanted to go. Like, that's always been the case.
Yeah, New York City is one of those few cities in the world that people view it as an experience. Like, I'm going to go to New York City to experience that, but I don't see myself living there for the rest of my life. And people who don't be like, oh, I spent my 20s in New York, and they start naming all these things that I love, and it's awesome. And I never really thought about it until COVID. I've been frustrated lately because even though I'm pretty optimistic about 2021, back to school, but a lot of businesses that we know and we hear about, the dam is breaking a bit. It's been months. It's been since, I guess, the self-imposed quarantine started in March. And now we're in September, and businesses were able to do it for like 3 months, maybe 3.5, 4 months. And now successful ones are just putting up the white flag and saying, this is math. It's having 6 extra seats or 16 extra seats on the street is like 25% of their revenue.
Yeah, I know restaurants are desperately calling for some indoor dining, even though they know it's not safe. I think everyone knows it's not safe. And if you want to connect, spikes, second waves is directly tied to indoor dining and indoor drinking. But it's that level of desperation because, it is so arbitrary. Who's got outdoor seating? Who's got space out in front of their restaurant? Who's got a terrace? Who's got a backyard? Oh, you don't have any of those things? Your restaurant is long and narrow with a storefront? Cool, you get 6 tables. And that's going to be your entire income. And if it rains, you will make nothing. It very, very, very tough time for so many restaurants. And, Fat Radish closed.
Did they? I didn't hear about that.
Yep. Trophy Bar closed. Anchoy closed. A lot. And these are places that were,
hot spots.
They were successful. They were part of sort of, the downtown circle. They were, not by my knowledge, places that were struggling to survive before this all occurred. And I think we're just going to get a steady, maybe even rising sort of drip drop of, oh, they closed? I thought they were doing fine. No, guess not.
Yeah.
And I thought a lot about this when I saw this I don't know if I guess it went viral, but it was a tweet where someone put up, how many restaurants have you eaten in since March? Like, promise I won't judge. And
yeah, right.
Yeah. And it was thousands and thousands of responses. And like 99.9 of them, of the ones I looked at, I did not look at all of them, were just 0, 0, 0, 0. Enjoy death with your linguine, 0, 0, 0. If you are, I hope you die, 0, 0, 0. And I thought about this exact conversation. I'm like, well, there's a lot of different vectors here. One is that if you go outside in New York or London, and I presume a lot of cities, people are eating outdoors. There is seating. Like, you walk through Manhattan, there's people eating everywhere. Didn't see anyone replying, oh yeah, like once a week. Everyone just steered the fuck away from that entire thread. I looked at it. I didn't say anything. I've eaten at a few restaurants. It's not a ton, but some. I didn't say a word. And it's this weird combination of things where you have restaurants that are dying. People are afraid to say that they're going to them, while you have people really, really like doubling down on do not eat at restaurants. Don't go outside. Don't do it. And then you have like London, where they just started offering a deal, which maybe should be duplicated here, where they're subsidizing people's meals. I believe it's up to $15, so it's not like a huge meal, but something along those lines. But they will pay half your dinner. So if you go to a restaurant, the government will pay up to $15 to match your order. And apparently it's bringing tons and tons and tons of people back out to eating in restaurants. But I don't know. There's a lot of different angles here. But it was very odd to see people on the streets here eating, to hear about London encouraging people to help these restaurants that we know are jeopardized surviving, while seeing this thread in which basically no one would admit that they're eating outside at restaurants. A lot going on.
Yeah, I can kind of see it both ways, and I've been trying to go out more to eat restaurant. I sat down at my first restaurant a couple weeks ago, and they took heat tests. They had the laser to my skull, and and they weren't seating at back-to-back tables. They were staggering them, but a table in between each party, and they were doing such a great job of it. And on one hand, I think it's sort of like sports or the stock market or and in this case, science. Science keeps on changing. You can't just be like, Steph Curry's the best. It's like always hurt. It's like, well, I don't know. I assume he's the best. So I think the science has changed in with COVID in that in New York, it's okay to eat out. If it was not okay, we would hear about it. But you can sit in a table with your friends outside and be careful and go ahead, And I think on the other hand, the peer pressures is what got us here. But it just takes a lag. There's a lag with everything. It's like we're supposed to say, no, we're not doing that, even though the people are, right?
That's right. That's exactly the dynamic that is really strange, because New York has had al fresco dining for a couple months. There has been no spike whatsoever in cases or deaths. Like it's just remained stable. So it's pretty clear.
It's pretty safe.
Eating outside is okay, as long as people are, apart from each other. Overall, this is not going to have a massive effect on your COVID rate.
You cannot get it by touching stuff. Like that was the fear.
Yeah.
And if you're outside, you're good.
Right. So it's like you're outside and, the staff is wearing masks. You're not close to each other. You're abiding by, social distancing and so on. Looks good. It's fine. It's also... the government is saying it's fine. New York State is saying it's fine. New York City is saying it's fine. And yet
scientists are saying
it's fine. And yet no one will defend it on this entire post because they don't want to get yelled at.
I mean, that's Twitter in a nutshell. I mean, I don't believe the conversations people have with their friends or at home are who they are on Twitter at all. But that would be surprising if they were.
I'm going to have a state-authorized meal in order to help my friend's restaurant survive. You monster.
I've been buying food that I'm not even hungry for. Like I walked by Williamsburg Pizza, the runner-up to the Cookies Classic, and I just bought a pie just to freeze it because I win in that transaction anyway because I have delicious pizza. But you just got to start doing that stuff, and it made me think about how we don't know if there's a plan yet. And then I did a little bit of research, and the city's hurting. Like de Blasio, your boy, your favorite guy, Bill de Blasio, your dude, knife and fork pizza guy. He's laying off staff, his own staff. So I think there's a lack of resources that's happening because we were made an example of, and our White House doesn't believe this,
A lot of factors. I am really concerned about, look, we've talked about this stuff so much and how dire it would get and whether it was survivable. And, I was like, will this last a month and change, when this first happened. And now we're looking at a winter where it's winter in New York City and heat lamps are expensive, and setting up a system in which you can warm people outside enough to have dinner is going to be really challenging for most restaurants.
How are they going to do it?
I don't know what's going to happen. Yeah.
I want, in my most naive mind, I wanted the city to just bless these small businesses with a PPP. Like, here's another $100,000. But now the budgeting doesn't quite work. There's not quite enough money to go around. And maybe we're back to where we were discussing in March. And Obama saying this is the new charity, and people like us need to do things. And me and you are planning stuff. Like, we just have to do it.
Yeah, I'm now an advocate of go out and support your friends' businesses safely. Go out and try to spend some money. If you're not comfortable, sure, do takeout. But like, man, these guys are screwed. And,
Is there? Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Is there a harder business in New York City than opening a place where you sell food? I can't think of I'm thinking of a writer, a publicist, an artist, a musician. I believe opening a brick and mortar restaurant is the hardest task in all of New York City.
Very challenging. And, Cuomo is not doing people any favors at all. Like your boy, his draconian rules about serving food along with drinks. Like Lovers Rock. Lovers Rock, a great bar in Bed-Stuy. Great bar, lost its liquor license. Not for any social distancing. Didn't do anything wrong. They weren't serving food. People were in the backyard, outside, having drinks, and there wasn't food because they don't have an operational kitchen. And there was like a couple people, 4 people who were like out front with a drink. Like crazy. You took away their liquor license for that? That's bullshit. That's total bullshit. And that's the kind of callous and like it's caring so much about the optics of street beers that you will actually take the liquor license away from a great bar that people loved just cuz. I can't rock with that at all. They need to get rid of that rule about having a kitchen. Like House of Yes got closed down, lost its liquor license. These are important cultural places. They had people dancing out front and they didn't have food. It's crazy, man.
My favorite question to ask over and over all day is when I see people doing stuff and I see news stories is, what does this thing care about? And I think the disconnect between the city and us right now is the oldest story. I don't think the city understands what we want, and we want these places. It's a cliche and hyperbolic to say New York City is the sum of all these small businesses, but it's kind of true, right? Like, I live in a place that I immediately describe in proximity to 5 businesses. And 3 of those businesses I'm thinking off the top of my head are now gone. And I care a great deal about these people. I've become friends with them. They are very cocky, strident people who are now admitting that they're really worried. I mean, they're confident in that they've had success for a long time, and they have their hat in their hands now, and it sucks. I hate to see it not in an internet way. I just don't like this, and I think your boy, your homie, Bill de Blasio, doesn't seem to understand what we care about.
100%. This is what happens when you put the Beantown Media Mafia in charge of New York City for 20-some years. Yeah. Bloomberg and de Blasio, you put people who do not understand the culture of New York, the things that we value as people who are longtime residents, that what makes New York unique. They look at Boston like you can't compare New York to Boston. They're completely different, like, cultural creatures. So to come from Boston and govern it in New York, of course these things that we care about are being shuttered left and right. Of course they're given no chance to survive because they literally aren't valued. He doesn't know or look and say, House of Yes is important. Or, right. This restaurant or this bar, like, it's just optics. It's just political survival and stacking up points. It's avoiding COVID shamers and people who are freaking out on Twitter about street beers. No respect at all or even recognition for what makes New York so important.
One of my favorite bars, and a bar me and you hung out at for years, Max Fish, when it was on Ludlow, there was just a person on the police precinct tasked to shut them down. And it took them years, but they were successful. And they had to shut down their Ludlow Street location because the guy who took down the clubs on the west side, which I talk about glowingly because it was such a distant memory. It's such a distant memory now. But it sucks that there's no club culture on the west side anymore. And now there's nothing there. I mean, the High Line is kind of cool. I'm not going to harsh on the High Line. I think they did a great job with that public space. But this guy on the force was tasked to just give Max Fish tickets until they ran out of money. And that's what happened.
And I think they also managed to shut down Motor City Bar, too.
Yeah, because there was 2 hotels going up that wanted those 2 liquor licenses.
Very cool.
It's a yeah.
Great, very cool. Super cool.
I know, but to your point, it's them saying, "Oh, this is just a dingy bar. Wouldn't a neighborhood like a beautiful hotel?"
And Quo's out there fist pumping like tourists.
But the tourists go to Max Fish.
Finally, some tourists.
But the tourists go to Max Fish. That whole place was lifted by visitors. Everyone was from L.A., Denver, from a skate event. Every time there was a skate convention or contest in New York, the Fish would be jammed.
There are also a difference in like the tourists that we like.
Oh, yeah. I don't know why I said it
tourists who
that way.
just parade up and down Bedford Avenue. Like you're like, oh yeah, of course it's cool to meet people from other places. Like sure.
Oh,
that's like the 1%.
But like locals too. Like there's cool locals that I really enjoy, and there's locals I don't really mess with.
Bono Bros.
Bonobo
Bros.
Bonobo Bros. I mean, they're local here. I always think to myself,
sure.
get out of my neighborhood. I'm like, oh, it's their neighborhood. I'm the interloper now.
Absolutely, 100%. So moving on to a cheerier subject. Rest in peace, John Thompson.
One of the greats, man. I mean, sorry for that laughter. That segue caught me off guard, but
I was trying to lighten the mood before we go into talking about death, and there was a bunch of it recently between the last couple times we potted. Rest in peace to Cliff Robinson, former Trailblazer, Uncle Spliffy, marijuana legalization advocate. Rest in peace to Lute Olson, coach of Arizona, won a chip in 1997 with some of your guys, Jason Terry, Mike Bibby.
I love Jason Terry.
Michael Dickerson, Miles Simon. Mm-hmm. And, of course, rest in peace to Chadwick Boseman, Black Panther, actor in a number of excellent films. But that came out of nowhere, and it turned out that he'd been sick for years and actually was doing stunts and, very physical, intense acting roles in Black Panther while he was, fighting cancer.
Yeah, man, I was a huge fan of, I like superhero movies, but we do a pod about people who dress up in superhero costumes and dunk basketball, so I think it's okay. But I was a huge fan. I am a huge fan. And to see an A-list celebrity go down like that, my immediate thought always goes back to Kurt Cobain. It's that kind of seismic cultural 90-degree turn as soon as this happens. And him dying was just really sad. I don't know. He was as loved as someone like Kurt Cobain was. And it's going to affect an entire generation of kids, right?
Well, I think that idea of an actor, or it could be a musician, an artist, being inseparable from sort of their greatest work. In certain cases, like, Mark Hamill is Luke Skywalker no matter what. And I think that's the case with Chadwick Boseman, despite the fact that he was in other movies. To everyone, he is Black Panther. And this is also the dying of Black Panther, of, a breakout star black superhero in a movie that broke records left and right. So I think it's not just the death of a well-loved actor, it's the death of his character as well.
Yeah, and it was a movement, man. And I think it was cool because I do think we gave him his flowers when he was alive. The reaction to that movie was cultural, and totally. It changed our country and what we did for entertainment and how we thought about entertainment moving forward. Like just seeing those theaters cheer. I go to all those Avengers movies in the theaters and stuff. I love that stuff. And Black Panther comes on at Endgame and the whole crowd erupts. Like that is not any different than Bernard King coming back on the court at the Garden. These are tremendous feelings that we have towards this symbol and this person. And I mean, he got a lot done in his short life. He was an amazing actor, man.
Oh, rest in peace to that man.
Yeah.
But John Thompson is someone who, I have deeper feelings about as someone who grew up as a big fan of Big East basketball, you know,
Oh,
Georgetown versus Syracuse. When I was growing up, they would bring out TVs into the cafeteria for the Big East tournament, but not the NCAA tournament. Like the Big East tournament was it, and that was the rivalry. It was Syracuse Georgetown. You know, later UConn came up, and you always had teams like Villanova or St. John's who was in the mix. But it was, you know, Seton Hall, Providence. They had their squads, but it was really Syracuse Georgetown. And even though I lived upstate and Syracuse was our local team, I loved Georgetown, and I loved John Thompson, and, you know, Ewing is a bit before my time, but those guys of like Mourning and Mutombo, Iverson, Junkyard Dog, and John Thompson is this
Othello Harrington.
Harrington.
He was good. He was good.
Victor Page, who taught AI the crossover. You know, but as Don Reed, but as John Thompson, as this hulking, intimidating, cagey, like crafty coach who was also incredibly dignified. Like he carried himself with like such presence.
He had that Paul Silas energy.
Yeah, I mean, almost like a not like a golem, but just this. He's so huge, and you'd see him shaking hands with like Jim Boeheim, and Jim Boeheim would be dwarfed. like he was a pillar in all of these cultural ways, but also like physically and like his demeanor, just a titan of college basketball.
Yeah, man. And I think growing up in New York and Patrick Ewing, his tenure at Georgetown was also before my time, but Ewing was not, and Ewing was my guy. And I think the succession of Georgetown centers into the East, like the rivalry with Alonzo Mourning, the players you're talking about, Mutombo, and the Knicks kind of like, we've talked about this before, trying to stake their identity on Patrick Ewing and the Georgetown center. Georgetown was my college team too. Allen Iverson is an irresistible athlete, I think, and his story was something that I think we really rallied behind as kids, watching him ball out in Georgetown, which is far from here, far from New York City. And the colors were cool, the logo was cool, the players were cool, and they were cool. And John Thompson was the guy. And seeing him in the NCAA tournament play against or coach against Lute Olson and Coach K, Thompson was my guy, man.
It's funny because Georgetown, as we know as an adult, it's a pretty waspy, blue-bloody college. I mean, very much so. Hyper elite, wealthy, you name it. But Georgetown growing up was a symbol of blackness because of John Thompson.
For sure.
Because of his success, because of the players he recruited, and, you know, his embrace of being that kind of program. I mean, they put kente cloth as like the trim on Georgetown Hoya uniforms. Yeah. It's crazy.
And
I don't mean crazy that's insane. I just mean they did that at Georgetown University, which is like, you know, where conservative Supreme Court judges grow their wings. You know?
And I was too young to know about life or anything as heavy as that. But when you see a whole tournament with Bobby Knights and then John Thompson walks on the court with Allen Iverson, I don't know. It was those were powerful images even as a child.
Yeah, I mean, if you look back, Ezra Edelman did a documentary on the Big East, and it really focuses on Syracuse against Georgetown, and he really gets into the racial components of it as well, and you know the abuse that was targeted at Thompson, but especially Patrick Ewing, of course, and that's worth a watch if you are not well versed in the history of the Big East and specifically this rivalry that we're talking about or John Thompson's legacy. Really, really recommend checking that out. Also, Ezra Edelman, former Cookies guest and a Oscar winner.
Yeah, man. Big deal.
Yeah, the director of the O.J. Simpson
Huge
docuseries on ESPN.
Yeah. And I don't know, they've been replaying on Twitter the Allen Iverson Hall of Fame acceptance speech where he talks about John Thompson, who's sitting right next to him, and their relationship. And Patrick Ewing talks about it constantly. And there is, I overuse this word, there is a melancholy to it because I immediately think of Patrick Ewing's jersey retirement week and how his, in New York, when they put his 33 in the rafters with their relegation championship rafters, banners. But I think it was disappointing, or it kind of shaped the way I looked at a lot of things growing up with Patrick Ewing, and him coming back after it was all over and us being like, you are the greatest player who's ever stepped foot on this court, and him apologizing and saying, I wish I could have done it, and him being like so close, and those injuries in 99, and he was right there, and those battles with Jordan were ingrained in my memory. And his take was like, I wanted it so bad for New York. You don't understand, but I couldn't do it. I'm sorry.
And we talk about this all the time, how someone who's picked first in the draft, like, you won at life, my guy.
Oh,
that is
1000%.
incredible. That is incredible.
Yeah.
Out of all the people in your draft class across the entire globe, you were the one who went first. That's insane. That is an accomplishment that is so foreign to like 99.999999999% of people. Mm-hmm. And that's like Anthony Bennett. Like, that's crazy. You were the number one draft pick. That's so bonkers. And then you look at someone like Ewing, who has this sort of shroud of sadness about him that he couldn't get it done. It's like, you were like a top 5 basketball player on the planet. You're an icon. You're like
Team USA.
So
Dream
sad.
team.
So sad. Just a tragedy about that guy. You're like, no, man. It's one of the top 5 basketball players on the globe. That guy is like such a winner.
The best player to play in New York, I think. And he's the coach of Georgetown now. And
second, Keith Van Horn.
That's true. I stand corrected.
Come on.
We need this fact checking in real time. Yeah. Thank you for that.
I don't want to go back and edit this out because this is great stuff. But yes, KVH and then Ewing.
True. But Ewing is coach there now, and I hope he has success. Your boy Mac McClung transferred out. But if Mac McClung doesn't become a Celtic, I will be shocked at some point in his career. But Pat Connaughton did not go to Boston either, which is confusing to me. But I hope. I would still root for Georgetown. I don't know how I'm going to view the NCAA next season. I'm like even a few steps grouchier about it after all of this COVID stuff. I just don't love that whole tournament and that whole business structure more. But I don't know. I hope they start paying players, and I hope the Big East comes back strong, baby.
Yeah, as you know, I've totally opted out on college ball, but I do support the players, obviously.
Yeah, and hopefully maybe this G League will help them out.
We've chatted about it. We'll see how it works out, but that team in California has like 3 of the top 30 guys now. The G League team that they more or less kind of created for top prospects to come play on. It's got like
they got 5-star recruits.
Yeah, they have like basically the number 1, another guy in the top 10, another guy in the top 30. Again, this is not my realm of expertise. Very little is, but it's substantial. That team is awesome. In the G League is going to take a serious chunk out of the talent pool at the highest end, I think, over the next couple of years.
You're a New York City basketball street warrior. How come the city hasn't produced top-level talent since Telfair, Malik Sealy, Stephon Marbury? Those are a long time ago. Where are the New York City ballers?
I don't know. There's been a lot of talk about that, whether it's gentrification and like literally pushing black people out of New York City, whether it's video games. These are different conversations you hear. It's the video games, man. No kids are on the playgrounds. Growing up, it'd be 50 kids out there. Now they're all on their calls of duty.
Yeah. Well, there was that documentary about Kevin Durant, I believe on Showtime, It's called like Something in the Water, where his hometown produced a lot of pros. And the question was, is it cultural or is it luck? Do great young players create a culture where other great young players can grow? Or is it just like, well, you guys produce like 3 amazing players in a 10-year span? That's incredible.
Hard to say, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think there is certainly an element of luck in terms of, do you get guys who have like that kind of height, that kind of athleticism, that kind of wingspan, just
the skill to want to play basketball too, right?
Right. But I mean, you can have a city with an active basketball like culture, and you can, have great coaches and great players who give back to that, and you cultivate a basketball scene. I think that is a totally valid idea. But also, these guys are so unique that you can't just take a normal dude and turn them into an NBA player because they love the game. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So you actually have to have like, oh, you're 6'9". Okay, that opens up some doors here. Yeah. Like, oh, you are, lightning quick. I do think. I mean, for example, right? Mark Cuban will say, in Europe they have this culture of basketball. They are pros at 13. They are involved in national programs at 8, like Luka Doncic. Then where are they? Like,
right.
Where are they then? Why aren't they flooding the NBA if they have such better programs? Because it's really hard. Yeah. It's just really freaking hard. But you know what I mean? If Europe is so advanced and these guys are learning these skills and how to pass and how to play, where are they? Yeah. They aren't dominating the NBA. There's one guy
I know.
out of the top. Yeah. You have Giannis, but that's because, again, it's just so hard. It's so hard. You can't just build NBA players. It's not like the Dominican Republic with baseball.
I agree with you. Just for a conversation's sake.
I'm really talking about height is just such a huge component of the game.
Yeah. So only for conversation's sake, I hear you. Cultural, it's an interesting discussion because, let's say Dominican Republic, you have incredible hand-eye coordination, speed, just like baseball central. And you create a pathway to which they can use those skills to create a life. And that's why I'm really interested in this new G League, because I believe maybe it could be cultural in a sense that, for argument's sake, let's say you are tall. Let's say you have a wingspan. Let's say you love to ball, but you also love music and you want to be a music producer. And someone gives you options. You can go play at school for free for a year, or you could just try to be a music producer now. And they're like, well, I love hooping, but going to the pros isn't that likely, and there's no situation for me to make money for my family if I go to play at Seton Hall. And now that the G League is out there, maybe you have some ballers, and this is a cultural phenomenon. We created the G League and said, well, if you want to go ball and produce music, the G League will pay you up to $100,000. Be like, ooh, maybe I'll work on my game.
I'm certainly open to any kind of like nature versus nurture discussions on this topic, because if we assume that height, and I'm only using height because the NBA specifically requires it at 3/4 of the positions.
Wait, are you saying I cannot be the starting point guard for the Knicks?
Would be tough. Would be tough. But I would guess that most states, most cities, most areas have a relatively similar breakdown of height, right? So there are as many kids who are from 6'5" to 7 feet tall.
I don't know.
Proportionally anywhere. Maybe.
I don't know. That's
Maybe.
why the NBA is doing that Africa outreach, right? In certain countries, because there are very tall people from, I believe, the Sudan.
Sure. I think regionally around the world it's true. I don't know if it's the case for the United States. That's all I was talking about. Like, why doesn't New York have these guys coming out, but Virginia does? And I don't think there's a part of New York that is necessarily taller, or excuse me, a part of the United States that is taller than another part. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I don't know.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
But if we're going to say that they're similar, you would say have the same amount of kids who are 6'10" coming around. And what percentage of the population is that? It's kind of tiny. So it comes down to like, is your 6'10" guy ready to play basketball or not? So maybe having basketball culture be really strong is how that guy would be more into basketball and liable to have picked it up at an earlier age. So he has like enormous skill set versus a place that doesn't have basketball culture where he ends up 6'10", but doesn't have the background of skills to be Anthony Davis.
It's funny, we've seen all these pictures of Barron Trump recently. And well, every third comment is like, well, can he ball? Does he ball? Because he's abnormally tall.
Like Osama bin Laden.
But like, yeah, I don't know. And yeah, we could have this debate with all the research and information at our hands, and we'll never really know, you know.
I'm basing my entire thing around you can't teach height. That's literally my only argument.
Height is a skill. Height is a skill, but you can teach a skill. But you cannot teach height.
You can't teach height.
But there are big guys who don't play as tall as your boy Dort, you know, or Eddie House Jr. or PJ Tucker, which is the beauty of the Houston Rockets because they play big.
Yeah, I mean, I think my ultimate takeaway on this topic is going to be that it all matters. There's luck involved, but it also is like, do you have a basketball culture in your city where kids are into it and you can identify talented players? Yeah. Yep, they can get on the court. They are coached. They develop skill sets early on, and then when you get that guy who ends up being 6'10", he's Anthony Davis instead of a stiff.
And this is cultural in the way, and no sin bin, baseball is dying a little bit in America because it's not cool to play baseball anymore. And you're right, it's everything. But one component is it's not cool to play baseball. It's cool to play basketball now.
Yeah, and when I've traveled to places for work and involving basketball and been in places like South Side of Chicago or Compton in Los Angeles, you see very visibly, it's very overt, the idea like, use the game, don't let the game use you. Like, it is built into it that this is a way out of poverty. This is a way to a better life. And it's not necessarily to be a pro. It's to get to college. But when you do have that ideology that you're saying, look, basketball can help you. Get involved with it. It can help you. It can lead you places. You can take this and you can get a scholarship. That if you do have that in the groundwater, maybe you do end up with more guys like Kevin Durant.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to this G League. I think we're going to see a reconfiguration of how we handle. There's just like too much potential there. I mean, on one hand, there's too much potential to like earn money for the people who are concerned with that. But like, basketball's never been more popular, right? And I think there's potential for some. Like the G League, I'm looking forward to it restructuring the way the college sports cultivates, like the potential of these young players, and I think it's time. I mean, coming out of a pandemic, what better time is there, right?
Well, also, what better time to talk about the NBA playoffs?
Oh, we're an NBA podcast. Welcome to the Burger Bub, Ben.
We were just kind of talking about the NBA. I thought that was a great discussion of which we came to no conclusions based on no evidence.
Well, it's one of those things.
Well done.
The more I look into something, like the New York should be paying these restaurants to stay afloat, and the minute I just Google it, I'm like, oh, this is very complicated.
I mean, I, in the course of 5 minutes, went from it's dumb luck to it's in the groundwater. So, like,
this is what we do, baby.
I'm clearly just trying to work it out like everybody else.
Well, can I change your mind and say Giannis Antetokounmpo is the greatest single isolation defender of all time? Can I work that magic today?
He did match his season averages with 1 block and 1 steal in their game, and he did contest 3 shots, the same as let's see, Wesley Matthews. Truly a dominant defensive performance by the reigning defensive player of the year. I love this series so much. I love it. It's great.
Oh, yeah?
And we're talking about...
Are you being sarcastic, or is this... real?
No, I love it.
Well, the Heat are must-see TV a little bit.
As a lifelong Heats fan,
I've been a season ticket holder since '71, man. Don't even talk to me.
I came over on the Mariella boat lift and was a huge fan of Sherman Douglas.
I carried Ronnie Cycli's records, man. He went into the club and I had those crates right behind him.
I was rooting for Miami when it was a Native American tribe.
I named myself after Baby Jordan. Baby Jordan.
That's a true minor. Barely legal.
Untapped potential.
Nature or nurture.
Yeah.
But yes, the series is really fun, and game one happened. So you have Miami, which is a bruising defensive team with a ton of interchangeable tough guy defenders. And, of course, you have the bruisingest bruiser of them all in Giannis Antetokounmpo playing against them. And in game one, which was very competitive, the Heat won. And a lot of it was Jimmy Butler's heroics. But they did an incredible job on Giannis. They packed the lane when he would drive. They pinched down from the corners and swiped away at the ball. It felt like the ball was getting knocked out of his hands constantly. They were so disruptive. And they also have Bam Adebayo, who is he might be bigger and stronger than Giannis, as hard as that is to believe.
I'm a huge Bam fan, man.
One man Bam fan over here.
Man.
That was a great game, and I'm so excited for the rest of the series. I did not know. I'm lying. I was like, I had to pretend to kind of contemplate rooting for the Bucks after their noble stand in the bubble, but I was lying. I mean, I'm rooting for Miami.
I mean, how quickly forget, like, we're dogging Chris Webber again. We're rooting against
I know. I feel
a false
bad.
king in Giannis. But I will stand by my Cookies take that I don't mind the Bucks at all. I love their complementary players. I love Chris Middleton, whatever. I've always liked him. I know he's boring. He's a middleman. But I've always liked him. I draft him in fantasy every year.
I know.
Oh, I know. But you're right, and there's an electricity to the Heat that I love so much, and a lot of it is Jimmy Butler's vibe and Bam Adebayo's name, and like the comical unitasker skill set of Tyler Herro and Duncan Robinson. But they're a fun team, and I find myself also almost catching some Z's when I watch the Bucks because they're too efficient.
The worm has turned.
Well, they're efficient and they have a game plan and they stick to it to a point where it's very predictable and there's no chaos there. And,
yes, I agree. And their defense is a gimmick. And that's not to say it's not great.
Right.
Their defense is fantastic, but it is a gimmick.
Yes.
And the Heat's defense is not a gimmick.
Yeah. And I think the awesome thing about these matchups, if we call them like heavyweight fights, finally we get to see teams play at least 4 times against each other. Like the Lakers, there's chaos there. That's awesome. They're must-see TV. The Heat, there's chaos there. Jimmy Butler could be a top 5 player or a top 50 player any given night, and he has a cool disposition. There's a lot of
playoff Jimmy hits a little different.
I love it. And then you get like the Celtics or the Bucks, which they're very singular and they're good. And all 4 of these teams I could see winning the championship, to be honest.
The Celtics have a lot of players that I enjoy watching, but I don't love watching the Celtics. Like, they're cool.
Yeah,
I really
Smart's
like.
cool.
I love Marcus Smart. I like Jaylen Brown.
We do this every episode.
We
like
Kemba.
everybody except Tatum. Every episode.
I guess where we're going with this. I love Theis, the way he sets those picks where he dives into the lane and then screens off.
My
the big
guy
man.
Inez Cantor just comes in and just like is the light of my life, man. But there's one guy I don't like.
Oh, Time Lord. Oh, man. Fascinating young big man. Oh, what a character. Oh, I mean.
I do love the Time Lord.
Same. Oh, top down, the whole roster. Just incredibly fun to watch. But as a team, I'm not that into watching them. They're okay. But I really do like Miami because maybe they're what the Knicks dream of being.
Oh, get out of here. Don't even bring my relegated team into this discussion.
But they are actually, and it's the black uniforms, it's the endlessly regurgitated dogma of Heat culture and how hard they work and how tough they all are. But I think that is a good example of nature nurture. The Heat are like, we want tough guys. Our organization breeds tough guys, but we also go out and get tough guys. Like, those are like.
Well, it's Alonzo Mourning effect, right?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, Jay Crowder's perfect for us. Well, right, because he's a tough guy. So you want him on your team, and you got him. Iguodala, tough guy.
Dragic is kind of a tough guy. Small, Dragic. Small but tough guy.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it makes sense. It's not just that the Heat are tough. They get guys who are tough and then become tough as a team. Anyway, nature versus nurture. They are awesome to watch. I don't love Dragic. He's okay. But
oh, really? I think he's super fun.
He's a good player. I love Jimmy Butler. I love Bam.
Those two white guys shooting is funny. They're funny.
Cool. I like Crowder. I like Iggy. They're just a cool team.
Yeah, I'm a fan, man.
They are so unbothered. That's why I really fuck with them heavy.
Yeah.
Like you see that the Bucks have like a 3-point play and they just kind of casually walk back like, all right, whatever. There's an element of like, we got this that I really enjoy.
Well, where do we want to go with this conversation? Because on one hand, I want to hear you take down this Defensive Player of the Year. But on another hand, I want to hear you take down Sixers Nation regarding Jimmy Butler. So we got options, man.
Well, I've talked about Giannis's defense in the past. I'll just say this one thing. I'm not sure he's among the top 3 defensive players in this series.
That's fair.
I think Bam is clearly better. I don't think that's even debatable in terms of their impact on the game. It's not even close. I think Lopez has like a skill set that's really important to their defense, as does Giannis. But Brook is awesome at rim protection. But I don't know that Giannis is necessarily a better defender in this series than Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler is out there working.
I love Jimmy Butler's defense, man-on-man defense, but I agree, and I think it's odd to think that Giannis is more acceptable as an MVP than he is Defensive Player of the Year, and the different criteria we have for those two arbitrary awards. Because the MVP is kind of a worldview, but the Defensive Player of the Year kind of demands a closer look, because it's not as easy to add up counting stats like scoring points or wins. And Defensive Player of the Years require a little bit of nuance and a little bit of knowledge, right? And to talk about things like deflections and isolation defense and gravity.
Well, we had I think I would say this Defensive Player of the Year award for Giannis was the Nerds' biggest victory to date. And that's unfortunate because they're wrong. But this was the Nerds' biggest victory ever. Because all the nerds were citing defensive box plus minus, PIPM, all these stats, defensive rating, shots contested at the rim percentages, all these things, the Bucks' defensive rating, over and over. It was all math. He
dominates those cumulative stats.
Yeah. And it was so based on numbers that it came down to a very obvious argument if you believed he was a great defender, which was the Bucks defense is the best. Let's look at this team. Is it because of Wesley Matthews? Is it because of Chris Middleton? Is it because of Brook Lopez? Well, no. There's one obvious candidate, and it's Giannis, because we pretend Giannis is everything. And look, the defensive numbers match up. Absolutely, it's Giannis. He is the king of this defensive team. But he's not. He's a beneficiary of a brilliant, if boring, defensive stratagem, which is packing the paint constantly. So that's why Giannis doesn't have blocks. He doesn't have shots defended. He doesn't have steals or deflections because he doesn't really do anything. And you watch it out there against the Bucks. He doesn't do anything. He just stands there and runs into the paint on occasion. He's so inert for being considered a great defender. I think he's pretty good. He can do some cool stuff. He's got long arms. He can help out in the paint. But in terms of being an awesome defender, they didn't even put the Defensive Player of the Year on Jimmy Butler.
Well, I think
Get out of here.
before, I mean, they don't.
Because Jimmy Butler will cook him.
Yeah, they're different type. They have different skill sets. But yeah,
I'm sorry. Would you put? I'd put Bam on him in a heartbeat. I'd put Ben Simmons on him in a heartbeat. I'd put Marcus Smart on him in a heartbeat.
So I think if you're claiming victory over nerds now, it depends, right? Because this matchup, I think Spo is a wonderful coach, and he has figured out some wrinkles, as he does, and Giannis has not been exposed yet. But in game one, you're just like, oh yeah, he may not be the best defender in the league because Spo can game plan him, but also,
you don't have to game plan Giannis.
But also, if he wins the championship, the nerds will win. And
I think Giannis is fantastic. I think he's the second best player in the league in terms of, his contributions to a team. He's certainly excellent within their scheme at what they do, and he's valuable as a weak side help defender at the rim. But, it was wild. People would say, look, people only shot X amount of attempts at him against the rim. And I'm like, yeah, but if you go and look at numbers every single year, the guys who are the best rim protectors in the league contest the most shots and block the most shots. And somehow he's just so much better than all of them that he doesn't add up. And that's why the looking at those stats and those numbers was misleading, because you can look at Gobert, you can look at Embiid, you can look at the best rim protectors in the league. They all contest shots. They all block shots. And somehow we're going to say that Giannis is great because he doesn't add up.
So where I was going with the MVP versus Defensive Player of the Year award.
Yes. Go on. Sorry.
Was, I think, no, but you're right. And where I was going with that is, I'm okay with the Defensive Player of the Year award turning into a team award, turning into a coaching award, because that's a lot of times what the MVP is, or the Finals MVP is. It is I hear that. It's an award to kind of tip the cap to what the Bucks did, and maybe it wasn't effort. Maybe it. I can't believe I said that. Maybe it doesn't accrue stats, but maybe it was a game plan that they wanted to congratulate. That's
the best explanation that I've heard.
Yes.
Congrats, King.
Yes. Woo, that was a close one. I almost lost it. But
no, that was good. I would appreciate that. It was just more that the arguments for him were all stat based, and I'm like, don't bring stat based arguments to me without looking at all of them. Don't tell me, well, PIPM leads the league by a lot. I'm like,
PIPM is a leprechaun-ass stat.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the numbers. I look at them too. I'm not being dazzled by his defensive BPM or his win shares per 48. Like, I know how these things get calculated in a broad sense. I can certainly not tell you right now.
Well, they keep on changing it on us. So.
Yeah, to help out boring players on the Celtics.
Not Marcus Smart, who we love. Not Enes Kanter, who we love.
Oh, my God. Did we talk about Time Lord yet? I love that guy and his sense of chronology.
He's the Lord of clocks.
He just puts things in order. It's great.
Yeah.
You know what I was thinking the other day? Don't see cuckoo clocks much anymore. I got to ask Time Lord about that.
Are they distracting, or are they just... Why do you think we don't see cuckoo birds?
No, cuckoo clocks.
Well, yeah, cuckoo clocks.
I'm not getting back into your whole bird wave earlier. I'm sticking with the clocks. The Time Lord.
Okay.
I mean, maybe they're just not in New York City, because it's kind of heavy to have a clock that weighs probably 300 pounds.
Right. I was gonna say you don't see wristwatches that much anymore either, or pocket watches, or normal. I almost bought. It's funny you mentioned that. I almost bought a normal clock for my house, like one of those round one with the arms. But why would I? Because time sucks. But I thought it looked nice because it reminded me of my childhood. And I was like, this is a nice one for $20. And I was like, why would I want to know that my day is going away?
But what if you could have a fake bird come out on some sort of thing and make noises at a certain time?
What if it was a positive affirmation cuckoo clock? Instead of being like, cuckoo, you're nuts, it came out and be like, you're so handsome. Your hair's growing back. You're the best tweeter.
So you think that the cuckoo clock is coming out periodically to insult you?
Well, it is calling me nuts. That's not very positive. Twitter should have that in the corner, the cuckoo clock option every hour. It just being like,
I mean, well, no wonder they're
tweet
not
that.
popular. Who wants that in their house?
Well,
So
they're-
anyway.
but that whole genre is amazing. Those clocks that like do stuff is incredible, right? Like the guys who saw wood and stuff.
Yeah, they're pretty good. They're pretty good.
That's awesome stuff.
Let's
great,
bring
great
those
stuff.
back.
Great stuff.
Yeah, bring them back.
Yeah.
Very quickly on Jimmy Butler, who was magnificent, scored 40 points, so a career playoff high.
Kind of
And
a prom king line though. 44
Dominic-
and 2.
He's got a job,
Fair
and
enough.
it's to show up with a corsage and
And
take this dance over.
and to befriend the most beautiful girl in his class who just has glasses, but he doesn't notice that she's pretty because she has a ponytail and glasses.
And then Kelly Olynyk brings his hair up into a pony, and it's like, what? Or I guess he lets his hair down and
Yeah.
takes his.
He takes
his
the headband
glasses
off. Yes. Okay. Rambus takes the glasses off. Right. Okay.
So anyhow, yeah, Jimmy Butler was splendid, and as a Sixers enthusiast, I was rooting for him because his success does put the Philadelphia front office's egregious failures in a harsher light and even greater relief than it already is, considering the team's flame out.
They would love to forget that.
Yes. And the only thing I want to say about Jimmy Butler that isn't obvious, that they clearly should have brought him back, was that so many conversations about, well, the Sixers and Jimmy Butler devolve into this sort of gossipy rumor mongering about what player liked what player. And, well, Jimmy wasn't going to come back because that Brett Brown and then Ben Simmons didn't really like him. And I'm like, none of this matters because we don't know if any of that is true. But also, this is why you need a real front office. It can't come down to we're not offering him Jimmy Butler a contract because Ben Simmons doesn't really like him. Ben Simmons is under contract for another year, and then he would be a restricted free agent. You don't have to say we're going to let Jimmy Butler, a top 15 player in the NBA, leave and rebuild around Al Horford because Ben Simmons wasn't crazy about playing with him for 3 months. Like, that's why you need a real front office, where you can say, I'm sorry, we're coming back next season with Brett Brown, with Joel Embiid, with Ben Simmons and Jimmy Butler, and we're going to win a championship, and then we're going to sort it out. Instead of saying, okay, let's get Josh Richardson, let's send Jimmy Butler there, let's do all these things because of mild emotional feelings amongst people. But again, all speculative. My thing is, front office did not offer him a contract. 4 years or 5 years. That was reported by Woj. That backs up with what I have heard from people. We know that Joel Embiid wanted him back. He does not seem to have any ill will towards Jimmy Butler, as if Butler left. It is clear that the Sixers did not offer him a contract. And that's all that matters. All the other he said, she said, well, all he said, but all the other little gossipy morass of people's emotions towards each other does not matter. The fact is the Sixers did not offer a 4 or 5 year contract to a guy who is a perfect fit for the team and is now eating alive the team that they built their large lad team to beat.
I'm happy for Jimmy. He's living his best life, dancing
Hell yeah.
to Hall & Oates in the playoffs with like kind of a cool team. I don't know many players who don't love playing for the Heat. We haven't heard of that much. And Deion Waiters maybe. And I think I do enjoy the palace intrigue of this Sixers era. And I only say that because it's going away fast. It's quickly de-evolving into Knicks territory, where there's just bitterness and blaming and made-up stories based off of the way people look and act. Like, so-and-so isn't happy. Look at the way he's standing. And
He
I'm
doesn't want to be here. He doesn't want to be here, so we had to trade him for nothing.
This is the tax that New York Knicks fans pay, and the Sixers are right. You guys are going to have a lot of years of this moving forward.
Spider-Man meme, Knicks and Sixers.
Oddly.
You know, the one thing that Philly has to be really careful of right now is, let me rephrase that. If there's enough outcry about the mistakes of the Philly front office, maybe ownership will be compelled because of seething dissatisfaction from a fan base that gets really mad and is very vocal.
And they listen to the fan base.
I think so too, because they don't have any real feelings of their own. And if they went and hired a hyper-competent GM, I think the Sixers could turn this around in a year and be easily the best team in basketball. Like, I really do believe that. I believe that the Sixers are not screwed. I believe that they are not stuck, and that a good GM can fix this by next postseason. That said, if you let these same guys, the dudes who've been in office, I'm using it almost as political sounding, but the guys who have been in the room for the last 4 years of bad decisions, if you let them stick around and try to sort out the sticky situation that they have created from one of the most ideal front office, layouts in modern history. It was the easiest job in the world, and they got here with it. And if you're going to think that they can fix this, we know what's going to happen. They're going to dump Al Horford for nothing. Mm-hmm. They're going to end up giving up assets in that deal. They're going to get a mediocre guy back who's the wrong kind of fit. Then they're going to end up with a coach that is not excellent, that does not work. They're going to end up trading Joel or Ben. Like, we know how this plays out, but it doesn't have to be that way. They could just hire someone good. That's what's so frustrating. It's literally a matter of saying, all right, Sachin Gupta, you're in charge now. Oh, wow, it's all better now. And I guess now I'm starting to feel a lot like a Knicks fan.
I was going to say, I mean, this doesn't even stop with the Knicks. This is how, we do everything. And where the Sixers were immune to this was things were working out. And I agree. I think you guys could save this. All signs point to you guys becoming relegated as well. But all you have to do is acknowledge that you still have a piping hot pizza. Those two players are very valuable and a treasure, and they're still young.
When people are saying the Sixers are stuck, they're doomed. No, they're not.
No, they have two.
No team in the NBA with two top 15 players is stuck. No team.
Two
You're
top
good to
10
go.
players. Yeah.
I'm even being generous. I'm saying
Yeah.
they're not stuck. They're in good shape. It's not like the Lakers have a good surrounding cast around Davis and LeBron. They just fit a little bit better.
There's no available player via trade that is as good as one of those guys. I believe they're both on the table for an offer, and those are the two best players this offseason moving forward for the next few years that will be available. Who's the next? DeMar DeRozan? Like, who's actually gettable? CJ McCollum? You're dealing with top-tier guys, and I mean, I don't even want Elton Brand to be fired. If they just bumped him down and gave the reins to someone else, like, you could do this.
This is the job, right? This is it. This is what a GM is supposed to do. They have a bunch of cosplay suits in there, and that's why they can't do the job. They don't know what they're supposed to do. They can't look at a basketball court and see which players fit with another player. They don't know they don't know what they're looking at. They are not basketball guys, as like corny as that phrase is. They don't know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. They are casual fans running a basketball team, and that's the kind of staff that ends up overpaying for Tobias Harris twice, letting Jimmy Butler walk because members of the Philly media didn't like Jimmy Butler, and they could get away with it. And people would be like, yeah, fuck him. Jimmy Butler sucks. He didn't work here anyway. This is how you end up in a place where you haven't created any young talent coming from undrafted free agency. You weren't able to pick up any little pieces. Look what Morey does in Houston. You got all these guys who are contributing. Jeff Green, Ben McLemore, Austin Rivers,
Eddie House Jr.
Daniel House.
Daniel House. Whoa.
So they have all these little contributors who they've scooped up at little places, whether as free agents or drafting, etc. Toronto does the same thing. Boston does the same thing. Good Spurs do it. Good organizations have a pipeline of talent, and they are always working.
Yeah.
And you look at let's talk about Houston OKC. And then we can get off the Sixers here. Look at these guys. All the dudes I mentioned. Then you got Lou Dort, who is an undrafted free agent.
Dort season.
It is apparent that some teams work hard and some teams don't. And Philly All you have to do is put someone who is smart and hardworking in, will not make panic trades, and will find a couple guards. That's all you got to do. Find me some cheap guards. Flip Josh Richardson, use some of those second round picks, use like little spots you have for small salary. Find me 2 rotational guards. Find me some guys who can chuck threes. Find them in the draft. You have 4 second round picks. Like, do the job.
That's why I always love when the interns bring up grill masters, because it can mean a ton of things, but in this situation, it makes me think everyone's been at a barbecue. The grill's going. All the stuff is you got your Beyond burgers, you got your Impossible burgers, you got your Beyond sausages. Everything's ready to go. And there's a certain type of dude, and a barbecue's full of them, be like, I know what to do here. It's like, I wouldn't do that. I would do that. It's like, well, actually, I've had success doing this. And someone has to declare themselves the master, usually the person who lives there. And because God forbid a grill master grills a grill that he doesn't own, right? And I feel that happens in sports quite often. And obviously, New York, our wonderful New York basketball team goes through this. I know what to do because I was an ex-player and I've had success in Los Angeles and Chicago. And it's like, well, yes, you have. Can you cook that burger? Ooh, it's really overdone. It fell through the grate. It's like, well, he is the master.
Yeah, and Philly's front office is coming to the grill, and they're like, we're gonna make one thing. We just have to come up with a big silver bullet hunk of meat that's gonna solve all of our problems. And people are gonna say, yeah, but you haven't done the work. What about the sides? Where are the little accrements? Where are the condiments? Where's the seasoning? What have you done to do this? Like, no. We're just gonna throw this hunk of meat down. It's gonna be Al Horford. That's gonna turn into a guard, and we're gonna dump everything on it. And I'm going to stop this metaphor, but point being, Sixers do not need one huge solution, one stroke that'll solve all of their problems. They need someone to go in and actually do the work.
Any team that hires an ex-player who's not really equipped to be a general manager, I think operates on the feeling of hope, and hoping that this successful player, all players who play in the NBA are successful, I think, and they hope Joe Dumars and Elton Brand and Vlade Divac, with their intuition and their relationships, could make this happen. And I'm like, that's fair. That's a fair point of view. The success rate to that depends on what other influences they have to inform them making decisions. And a lot of times you see some real swings and misses. And I believe Elton Brand is a smart enough man to put together a team, but he just hasn't.
I don't think Elton Brand does anything.
That's
I
fair.
don't think he's entrusted to make actual personnel decisions. I don't think he does anything.
That's fair. It's just owners getting in the way, which is something.
He's the grill master's meat shield.
Oh man, right. He fires up the grill, and then as soon as the Beyond Burgers come out, the grill master's like, "I'll take care of this." And you're like, "Well, I just prepped the whole thing." It's like, no. I know what to do here.
So apologies to everyone for more Sixers talk. But there was a mild Sixers relevant discussion there. Jimmy Butler. We didn't even bother you about Brett Brown. So apologies for a Sixers talk. But that's it.
We got to get it in because you guys are looking towards that face paint and listening to Mudvayne.
Well, so let's talk briefly here before we get out of here about OKC versus Houston. So they're heading into Game 7, which I believe is going to be played tomorrow. Fascinating series due to the presence of 3 guys who have all been teammates at various times, of Russell Westbrook, Chris Paul, and James Harden.
You just said that, and I just remembered they played together in OKC. That had not occurred to me for a year.
I take that back, actually. Chris Paul has not been teammates with Westbrook, but he was traded for him.
Yeah, I mean, no, I was talking Harden and Westbrook. I totally spaced on that.
Twice for the second time.
It's weird. Hey, man.
Chris Paul could not coexist with Russell Westbrook. They have not been on the same team. Let me just make sure I clarify that. Yeah. That relationship would not work. Yeah,
Russ, I've really loved Act 2 Russ quite a bit more than Act 1 Russ, the MVP triple-double kind of guy. I really love him at the hands of this Houston offense. But he had a rough game back from injury.
I think we can give him the benefit of the doubt because he's been spectacular with Houston since they got rid of Clint Capella and have started using Russ as the only non-shooter on the floor. And he's been
so cool.
Incredible in that role. And a couple of weeks ago, we ran off his stats, which I'm not going to bother to look up right now, but it was something like, 39-9 or something. He was just and hyper efficient because he'd stopped shooting threes. And
don't they have the number one defense in the playoffs right now? I mean,
that
not
I
many
don't
games.
know.
But
I'm not sure, but they've been stellar, and Westbrook has been great. So him coming back from injury, I think we can not pile on and give like the typical like, oh, Russ sucks. No, he's been awesome.
Yeah.
At the same time, he was doing too much.
It's chaos.
And that's always been the knock on Russ, especially down the stretch. That it's not necessarily that he's selfish or he wants the glory. He just wants to do it.
I love it. It's awesome.
It's irrational confidence to, use like Bill Simmonsy, parlance. But it's not even irrational in
It's
his
rational
terms.
confidence.
It's rational confidence.
Yeah.
But he did not need to be dominating the ball in the last minute of that game yesterday when James Harden's on the floor and you're coming back from an injury.
Yeah, and he doesn't have to be taking chances with some of those passes either. They were just kind of, I love chaos, but they were not responsible basketball actions at the time. Like if you want to pass out to Covington, make sure the pass gets to Covington's hands. So don't flip it in his direction as you drive through the lane. Well, I mean, these are micro observations, but you're right. His rational confidence is what makes him great because he's good enough to succeed after that. But when it doesn't work, it looks louder than it actually is.
Yeah, it's the constant pursuit of amends.
Yeah.
Oh, I fucked up, but I got it. Like, no, I fucked up again. I know, but I got it now. Like, no, why don't you let someone else get it?
Like when he threw the game away, the look on his face was like, oh, I can't wait till game 2. I'm like, neither can I. Oh, game 7.
I'm back.
Yeah.
I mean, let's talk about Chris Paul, though, quickly, because he's just magnificent. He's so good at basketball.
Maestro.
He's the only point guard, and I'm going to say point guard specifically, who I think is definitely better than Allen Iverson. You can throw Curry at me. I'll be like, look, different eras, different skill sets, blah, 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 blah. I'll argue Curry. I might say Curry's as good as AI. I can concede that people would believe he's better, but I'll argue it out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Chris Paul, I won't argue. He's the best. He's the best point guard ever. Magic Johnson's a power forward. Chris Paul's the best point guard ever. He is ridiculous. Mm-hmm. I know he doesn't have championships. He doesn't have an MVP. I don't care. Chris Paul is better than everyone at basketball.
Yeah, and, we always say this for years on Cookies. He should be in the discussion of the greatest players ever, I think. And the list is getting crowded, I know. But he should be up there. I think there was a perceived idea that he couldn't succeed in the playoffs for a while, I think, with Los Angeles. And that has kind of evaporated a bit, and we respect him as this gritty, hard-nosed, smart player. But he's gritty and hard-nosed and smart and amazing and all those things. He checks all the boxes. He's a bit boomerish for me. He's a bit grouchy, so I love to just make him the villain just so I can watch a game. I root against him, but he's so good.
He certainly is a cop on the floor in every respect,
Yeah.
trying to draw whistles on opponents by flopping, pointing out things that could be technical fouls, directing traffic, ordering people around. Huge cop energy.
Yeah.
But he's so nasty. When he got ISO after ISO on Robert Covington. Like, Robert Covington is a very good defender. That's a guy who was a top 5, all first-team defense. I know he's not a great individual ISO guy, but still.
Good enough.
That's a good defender. And Chris Paul chewed him up, spat him out.
Yeah.
ISO'd him, crossed him over, step back, like drilled a three. Went around him like he wasn't there, drew a foul on a reach. Chris Paul is so good. Even that last play you were talking about with Westbrook, I'm not sure Chris Paul didn't have something to do with that play.
Sure, it's that Kyle Lowry effect. Yeah.
You know, like Chris Paul on that play came swinging in at an angle,
Yep.
which kind of made Russ kick it out towards the wing. But CP3 was already turning off of him and following that pass. So, like, if you go back and watch that replay, I'm not saying that Russ threw it away because of CP3, but CP3 was on it. He was not only defending Russ, but also curling right towards the shooter before the pass even went. The guy's the epitome of a basketball genius.
Yeah, I agree. I think him and LeBron, I think, are the two smartest guys I've ever seen play basketball.
And it's not even just the cerebral, like, John Stockton floor leader. Like, Chris Paul will chop you up.
Yeah.
Like, ISO you and J you down. It's not like Stockton, who, you know, would run a pick and roll and hit open shots. Like, Chris Paul took that game over and just dominated. This might be the most pure Chris Paul team since the Hornets.
And before the pure Chris Paul team with him and RJ and Mitch Robinson and Ben Simmons. Yeah, it's going to be great.
But we're really seeing, like, the brilliance of Chris Paul distilled in some ways, even at this stage in his career, because there isn't a Blake Griffin who needs to be fed on the block. There isn't a DeAndre Jordan who's, you know, just
I like him.
A huge upper echelon, like, lob catcher, like,
Yeah.
brilliant lob catcher.
I like him.
He's out there with, like, solid players.
Yes.
No one needs to get fed on that team.
But
There's no other star. It's just Chris Paul's hand puppeteering this entire roster every time he's on the court, and it's so cool. And that's why they're good.
And this is the joy of this series, because his counterpart, James Harden, is not far off, man, but he does different things. His genius is a generational. And I wanted to talk about this a little bit. The Harden effect we're kind of seeing now in the way people step back and sidestep three-point shots to create three-point shots and how to draw fouls and get to the line. Like, we're seeing younger players do that now. And there was a moment a few years in the playoffs, I believe Chris Paul hit a shot on Steph Curry, and Chris Paul did the shimmy in Curry's face. And it was such a generational divide, because the reaction from Curry wasn't to use that as motivation or to get angry. He just started giggling and ran to his spot. And I thought that was like a real shifting in mentalities of this league. And I watching Chris Paul go against James Harden it reminds me of that, because I think Harden is an evolution from the Chris Paul prototype of player. And I think Chris Paul was an evolution of the Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan type of player. And you're watching Harden even kind of streamline what Chris Paul does into a different thing entirely, which cares more about one thing, manufacturing valuable shots, than it does Chris Paul, just kind of this overall brilliance, you know?
Chris Paul, I think Chris Paul obviously creates very good looks. Create, threes, cutters. He does those same things that James Harden does, but it's not as distilled. It's not as obvious. It's through the filter of, like, as you were saying, kind of like boomer basketball, like the floor leader point guard. But we don't think about James Harden as a floor leader, even though he obviously is, because he's a combo guard. He scores a ton. Chris Paul still falls under that old archetype, but he is doing the same thing.
Yep.
Right? Just less of the points are for him. I still think that, like, Chris Paul pre-knee injury might have been the GOAT. Like, he's just so crazy good.
Him and Tyson Chandler in Charlotte?
That version of Chris Paul, I'm not saying it was better than LeBron James, but it was right there. That was one of the best players who has ever lived. And he's still great, and that's a testament to his skill, his ability, how cerebral he is. But when Chris Paul could yam on you, that was a little bit different version from the one today.
Yeah, and I'm happy. I thought he was cooked with those knee injuries. They removed his cartilage, I believe, and they're saying most players with that injury don't really last long, and he's like doubled that estimate. I think if he came spiritually home to New York and the Knicks, I think he could have like 3 or 4 more years. And I don't know, he's the last of that banana boat generation, man. Him and LeBron are still holding it down. So
I mean, Chris Paul in 09, he averaged, and this was not a period where with explosive scoring like it is today, but he averaged 22.8 a game, led the league in assists with 11, led the league in steals with 2.8. And if you go down to, more advanced metrics, he led the NBA in defensive box plus minus. He had a BPM of 11. Like, he was just cartoonishly freaking
steals,
good.
Right?
He led the league in usage, led the league in steal percentage. One of those years around then, he led it in offensive win shares, total win shares per 48. That version of Chris Paul was just outlandish.
So, quick question. If you say that version of Chris Paul was maybe in the conversation of GOAT, he's had a very good career since then. Where do you place him now?
I mean, to me, he is the best point guard of all time.
I mean, he's a top 5 player, right?
You'll never win that argument.
I know. This is moot, right? Because I need Shaq in there.
Well, you need rings.
Yeah.
Like, you just do. It's hard to say, okay, well, he's better than Tim Duncan. You're like, well, I think he is. But it's Tim Duncan. What are you going to do?
I love Tim Duncan.
But that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to say that Chris Paul should be on a list above Shaq, should be above Tim Duncan, should be above, Wilt Chamberlain.
Yeah, and
should be above Larry Bird. I don't know. Chris Paul's still nastier than all of them, though.
To your point, I think it's easier to listen to someone say Shaquille O'Neal or Tim Duncan should be in the conversation higher. But it's hard to push that for Chris Paul because he just doesn't have the hardware. Whereas it's true. I think he sees eye to eye with Shaquille O'Neal and Tim Duncan.
I mean, career BPM.
Is this Boston BPM?
Yeah, I guess this is BPM too. I don't know, whatever. Basketball references BPM. And I'm not even suggesting this is anything you should care about, but just for the sake of argument.
Doesn't work
all
for
time,
Giannis, but works
all
for
time,
CP3.
all-time BPM. MJ, due to their tinkering from the Beantown Media Mafia, due to their tinkering, Michael Jordan is now ahead of LeBron James in all-time BPM average. Like, okay, great. So Michael Jordan is 1.
That was their objective, I think.
Might have been. Probably was. LeBron James is 2. Chris Paul is 3.
And Jason Tatum is 3.5.
But and then after Chris Paul are Magic Johnson, David Robinson, James Harden, Larry Bird, John Stockton, Kawhi Leonard, Kevin
What
Durant.
is Larry Bird doing there, man? Someone's cooking these books.
But I'm just saying, for all of the outrage that people would probably spout if I say, I think Chris Paul is like maybe the best player of all time, pre-injury Chris Paul, or is like a top 10 player. Hey man, BPM says he's third ever.
I know.
NBA and ABA.
But
oh,
if
I'm
you
sorry,
said,
ABA doesn't count.
If you said James Harden was a top 10 player, which I believe of all time, and he is on that list, what do you say, like 7 or 8? Like, that is as ridiculous, even more ridiculous, right? But
right, people would attack you with pitchforks and torches for both.
he's the best offensive player of all time, right?
Yeah, I agree. I'm fine with that too.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, whatever, fair enough, right?
Those guys, Keith Van Horn, like they're savants.
Yeah, baby Jordan. Tiny Jordan.
Hey, thanks to all of our Patreon patrons. Let's do like maybe a little early release on a restock this week for the team.
Oh man, they've been selling out on Patreon by themselves, and they don't even hit the non-Patreon audience.
They don't even hit a different audience. Well, that was a perfect pod. Good job, Quo.
Amazing, good job, Ben. That seems to be the perfect pod.
Yeah, thank you. Cookies.